My parents cut me out of the perfect family Christmas photo because I'm overweight and in a wheelchair, so I told Grandma, and she changed her will to leave them with nothing. I'm a 17-year-old girl, and I have a younger brother, Nathan, who's 15. For as long as I can remember, I've felt like my parents favored him over me. Nathan isn't their biological child, they adopted him about 9 years ago, but you'd never know it. He blends in perfectly with our family, almost like he was made to fit the mold. Honestly, he even looks more like he belongs than I do. I'm not just saying that out of insecurity. My parents have actually joked about it more than once, though something about the way they say it doesn't feel like a joke at all. Everyone in my family looks like they stepped out of a magazine ad, classic good looks, polished smiles. Meanwhile, I've always stood out in the worst way. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes when I was younger, which made losing weight a constant battle. My parents took control of what I ate, measuring everything and keeping a tight grip on my portions. It didn't feel like care, it felt like punishment. I remember hiding snacks and eating in secret, just to feel normal. It was miserable, and despite the restrictions, I still gained weight. I'll admit it right now, I'm overweight. Then 6 months ago, life threw another curveball at me. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And over the past 3 months, I've had to rely on a wheelchair off and on because the flare-ups get so intense. We don't even fully understand what's causing them, so there's no way to prevent it. Life was already tough before, especially as an introvert who never quite fit in at home. But after that diagnosis, things really went downhill. I wasn't just the chubby girl anymore, I became the overweight kid in the wheelchair. Mentally, I was struggling hard, and instead of helping, my parents seemed to pull further away. It became clear to me that they saw me more as a burden than a daughter. So I started isolating myself. I spent most of my time in my room, trying to stay out of their way. It felt incredibly lonely, but I figured it was better than constantly being reminded that I was a disappointment. Deep down, I always had this nagging suspicion that maybe they didn't really want me. I tried to brush it off, tell myself I was overthinking. But then something happened a few weeks ago that made it impossible to keep pretending. Almost 3 weeks back, my parents were talking about the Christmas postcard we send out every year. The next day, like always, I put on a festive red outfit and made my way to the living room, ready for the family photo. It was one of the few traditions I thought I could still count on, something that made me feel like I still belonged. But they took that from me too. The moment they saw me in my wheelchair, their whole mood shifted. They got awkward and then told me they were thinking of doing the photo with just the 3 of them this year. Their excuse? They didn't want the wheelchair in the picture because it might ruin the aesthetic. I was stunned. I tried to reason with them, offered to stand up for a few pictures even though it would be hard. But they pushed back, saying I should just stay seated and let them go ahead with it. That's when it hit me, they really didn't want me in the photo at all. Not metaphorically. Literally. I went back to my room and cried myself to sleep. What hurt even more was that no one came to check on me. It was one of the worst days I've ever had, capping off a really awful year. I felt completely invisible. That night, I finally called my grandmother and told her everything. She's my dad's mom, and honestly, she's the one person who's always made me feel loved. My grandpa passed away when my dad was just 10, and she raised him on her own. She's strong, kind, and one of the most inspiring people I know. If it were up to me, I'd have gone to live with her long ago. But I kept hoping my parents would change. That they'd eventually treat me better. That night, though, I realized that hope was a waste of time. My grandma already had her suspicions about how I was being treated. She'd even offered a few times to take me in. And that night, I told her I was ready. I needed out. I couldn't keep pretending I was wanted here when it was clear I wasn't. She listened, stayed on the phone with me while I cried, and told me she'd be there in a few days right after she got back from a cruise with her friends. Yeah, my grandma's pretty amazing. I made her promise she'd take me home with her, and after that call, I didn't bother saying anything to my parents. What was the point? They never even apologized for leaving me out of the postcard. They just went on like nothing had happened. And I did the same, because I knew I wouldn't be stuck here much longer. True to her word, my grandma showed up last week. For those 7 days, I barely spoke to my parents or Nathan. I'd go to school, come home, and spend the rest of my time alone in my room. But when she arrived, I was the one who answered the door and welcomed her in. My parents had no idea what was coming, so they were all smiles, acting like everything was fine. But my grandma wasn't about to play along. Not long after she sat down, she asked them point blank why I wasn't included in the Christmas postcard. It caught them off guard. The postcards hadn't even been sent out yet, so they were confused how she even knew. Then it clicked for them, I must have told her. Instead of apologizing or owning up to what they'd done, they just turned to me, rolled their eyes, and acted like I was making a fuss over nothing. They started trying to explain themselves to my grandmother, repeating the same excuse. They didn't want to burden me by making me stand for the photo, and they felt having the wheelchair in it would ruin the picture. I had stayed quiet up to that point, but that's when I finally spoke up. I reminded them that I told them I could stand for a couple of minutes, and it wouldn't have been that hard on me. The truth was, they were the ones who turned it down, not me. That made it crystal clear they just didn't want me in the photo, plain and simple. I called them out right there. I said they'd always made me feel like an outsider in my own home, like I didn't really belong, even though none of that was my fault. Then I pointed out the uncomfortable truth: Nathan may be adopted, but they treated him more like their real child than they ever treated me. Meanwhile, I was just the unwanted burden. It hurt to say it out loud, but it was the truth. Nathan and I used to be really close when we were younger, but as he got older, he noticed how our parents treated me. And instead of sticking by me, he slowly started pulling away. So in the end, I ended up feeling completely alone in my own house. To his credit, when I said all that, Nathan didn't argue, he just looked away, probably because he knew deep down I was telling the truth. My parents, on the other hand, immediately got defensive. They acted outraged that I had even mentioned Nathan being adopted, like it was some dark secret. But Nathan knew he was 6 when he joined our family. And I'd never once treated him differently because of it. I always saw him as my brother, no matter what. But that didn't change the fact that he was the one who looked the part, not me. That's why he got all the warmth and affection I was always denied. I guess, somewhere along the way, I started resenting them all for it. Even then, my parents didn't stop to reflect or show any kind of remorse. Instead, they flipped the script and accused me of being spoiled and cruel for mentioning Nathan's adoption, as if I was using that to justify my bad behavior. Then, unbelievably, they said they expected me to apologize. Before I could argue back, my grandma stepped in. I think she'd finally had enough. She said there was no point in dragging this on. She hadn't come over to watch them mistreat me again. She was there to put an end to it. And that's when she told them straight up that she was taking me with her. She said they'd never made an effort to hide the fact that they saw me as a burden, and since I'd be turning 18 soon, there was no need for any custody drama. I could just move in with her. There was a long pause. My parents just sat there, stunned. Eventually, they said that if my grandma really wanted to take me, then fine, she could. They weren't going to stop her. They didn't even put up a fight. That response said everything. They really didn't want me there. With me gone, it would be just the 3 of them, my parents and Nathan. The perfect little family they'd always dreamed of. For a second, I thought we'd be packing up and heading out immediately. But instead, my grandma smiled and said they had reacted exactly the way she expected. Then, right there in front of them, she pulled out some papers and told them something she'd been holding in for a while. She was officially cutting them out of her will. From now on, everything she owned would go to me and Nathan. At first, I didn't even grasp the full weight of what she'd said, but my parents clearly did. They started panicking, trying to reason with her. They said it was completely unfair to disinherit them just because I was being entitled and throwing a tantrum. Honestly, I hadn't even thought about my grandma's money before. She's always just been grandma to me. But now that I think about it, she used to be one of the top real estate agents in the state before retiring, so yeah, she's definitely not struggling. Still, the money never mattered to me. I love her because she's always been there for me, not because of her wealth. But my parents? Their panic made it clear what really mattered to them. She even showed them the paperwork to prove she wasn't bluffing. They started crying, begging, saying she couldn't just cut them off like that. But my grandma stood her ground. She told me to head upstairs, grab my things, and get ready to leave. Luckily, I had most of my stuff packed already. I'd been getting ready for this all week. I dragged everything out while my parents kept pleading with her. She ignored them the entire time. Nathan just sat in the corner, silent, almost like he was trying to disappear. Right before I walked out the door, he was the only one who said goodbye. My parents didn't even notice I was leaving. They were too busy trying to change my grandma's mind. Soon enough, we were in the car, driving away. I've been living with my grandma ever since. Her house is way closer to my school, so now I don't have to wake up super early for the bus. I can just walk. Honestly, I should have moved in with her a long time ago. But better late than never, I guess. My parents haven't reached out once since I left. But Nathan did. He sent me a text not long after I moved in. He admitted that I'd never treated him badly, and that he had, in fact, pulled away from me over the years. He said he hadn't even realized he was doing it until I called it out in front of everyone. He also said he felt guilty that maybe he'd allowed our parents' behavior to shape how he treated me. He thanked me for always treating him like a real brother, for loving him like family even when I wasn't getting the same in return. He said that if it hadn't been for our family, he probably would have stayed stuck in a really bad situation with his biological parents. So he was grateful not just to mom and dad for adopting him, but to me, and to grandma too. He told me he wanted a fresh start with me. So now, we've been spending time together again, mostly during school. It's still a little awkward, especially since he's been distant for the last couple of years. But little by little, I'm starting to see the old Nathan again, the one who used to look up to me, who used to think I hung the moon. Anyway, that's not really the point of all this. It's just, yesterday, while we were hanging out, he said something kind of offhand that's really stuck with me. The other day, while Nathan and I were hanging out, I casually asked how things were going back home. I didn't mean to pry, but I was curious, couldn't help myself. Nathan told me things were kind of falling apart. Apparently, our parents had already started blaming each other for everything that happened. According to him, mom was pointing the finger at dad, saying it was his fault I'd felt pushed away all these years. She even blamed him for what happened during the whole Christmas photo incident, claiming it was his idea to leave me out. On the other hand, dad wasn't taking it quietly. He turned around and said it was mom's constant overreactions and dramatic attitude that made me feel like a burden in the first place. He claimed she always made it seem like raising me was some kind of impossible chore. Nathan said things were escalating quickly and, honestly, he was worried they might end up getting divorced. He said it really casually, like it wasn't a big deal, but I haven't stopped thinking about it since. I know it sounds silly, maybe even irrational, but I've started wondering if their fights are my fault. Like maybe I overreacted. Maybe they didn't mean to make me feel the way I did. Maybe it wasn't intentional, and I just took everything too personally. I keep going over it in my head. What if the whole Christmas card thing wasn't supposed to be hurtful? What if I just took it the wrong way? It's been eating away at me, and I hate that I'm even thinking like this because deep down, I know better. But still, I can't stop myself. And that's why I decided to turn to Reddit, because I feel like I need some kind of reassurance from people who aren't biased or involved. So, AITA for getting hurt that my parents didn't want me in the family Christmas photo and for venting about it to my grandmother? Edit. Just to clear up a few things, my grandma didn't change her will just because I was upset. She did it because she saw, with her own eyes, how badly our parents had treated me. That's why she decided to leave everything to me and Nathan. Yes, I'll admit Nathan hadn't been the kindest to me lately, but he's still a kid. I'm still a kid. He's not even 18 yet. And both Grandma and I agreed he shouldn't be punished for our parents' actions. If we start treating him the way our parents treated me, then we're no better than them. That's not who we want to be. So yeah, I think it was fair that Grandma included him in the will, too. Some folks asked about Nathan's birth parents, so here's the background. His biological mom had him when she was around 19 and had to leave college because of it. On top of that, she was struggling with substance abuse. His dad bailed a few months after Nathan was born and only popped back into his life here and there, never consistently. My parents actually found out about Nathan through someone they went to college with, Nathan's biological mom's cousin. His maternal grandparents had tried for years to help their daughter get her life together and become a good mom, but it just wasn't happening. When Nathan turned 6, they convinced her to put him up for adoption because it wasn't just her life that was falling apart, his was, too. At the same time, my parents had been talking about adopting again. My mom didn't want to go through another pregnancy since her first one had been complicated, so when Nathan's aunt reached out, things moved quickly. They fostered Nathan for a while, and then adopted him officially. He still keeps in touch with his grandparents, he visits them every month, but he hasn't seen his biological parents since the adoption. His mom says it's too painful, and his dad's vanished completely. So since then, Nathan's just been my brother. That's it. No debate. I might have said something about him being adopted during that fight with our parents, and I do feel awful about it. I shouldn't have gone there. I was emotional, frustrated, and it just slipped out. But I've apologized to him since then, and we're working on rebuilding our relationship. We lost each other for a couple of years because of how our parents acted, but we're not letting that happen again. In fact, I've told him that if things at home get too overwhelming with all the fighting, he's welcome to come stay with Grandma and me. We've got room, and he's always got a place here. Update 1. Hey again. I just wanted to thank everyone for all the kind words and support. Reading your responses has been really emotional, but in the best way. Before posting, I felt completely alone, like no one could really understand what I was going through. But seeing how many people have been in similar situations has given me so much comfort. I took your advice and had a serious talk with my grandma about how I've been feeling, especially the part where I was blaming myself for my parents fighting. And just like many of you said, she reassured me that none of this is my fault. In fact, she told me I had every right to stand up for myself after years of being dismissed and mistreated. I've done everything I could to be a part of that family, to be accepted, and they kept shutting me out. Now that I've finally spoken up, and they don't have me to direct their frustration at anymore, they're they're turning on each other. That's not something I caused, it's just what happens when people refuse to take responsibility for their actions. Grandma helped me see that, and she's right. At this point, they don't have a scapegoat in the house anymore. And they're definitely not going to lash out at Nathan. So now my parents are just turning all their anger and frustration on each other. If they do end up getting divorced, yeah, it'll be sad, but it's not something I'm going to take on as my responsibility. And if they stay together, well, that's their business. Either way, I'm choosing to stay out of it. I talked to Nathan about all this too, and he assured me that he didn't mean to make me feel guilty when he told me what was happening at home, he was just answering my question. I know he wasn't trying to upset me, and I told him that. But I also let him know that if things got bad and he felt overwhelmed, he could come live with me and Grandma. I just didn't want him to fall into the same guilt spiral I'd been stuck in. He said he'd think about it, but for now, he wants to stay with our parents. He said he feels like he still owes them that much. And honestly, I get where he's coming from, so I have no hard feelings about it. We made each other a promise that no matter what happens between us and our parents, we won't let it come between the two of us again. And I really hope we can stick to that. Update 2. So, earlier this week, I came home from school to find my parents sitting in the living room with my grandma. The second I walked in, she let me know they were there to talk. But honestly, I'd had a rough day and wasn't in the mood for any kind of serious conversation. I told them if they had something to say, they could either send me an email or come back another day. Right then, I just needed some rest. But they insisted that they'd taken time off work specifically to talk to me. They said they wanted to spend time with me before I left for college, and that they were sorry if I felt hurt by the way they treated me. And I know some people might think I was nitpicking, but the way they said it rubbed me the wrong way. They weren't sorry for what they did, just sorry that I felt offended. That's not the same thing. The truth is, their behavior was offensive. That's why I was hurt. It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was years of being treated like I didn't matter. And now that I'm finally being honest about it, they wanted to shift the blame back onto me. They said that I'd also been distant, so they had no idea what I was going through. And in that moment, it hit me, they weren't really here to make things right. They were here to protect their own image. I told them to leave. I wasn't going to let them twist things around and make me the villain again. But they wouldn't budge. They said I owed them at least a conversation after everything they'd done for me. As if basic parenting somehow earned them a pass for everything else. I didn't even want to fight about it. I rolled my eyes and started walking to my room. That's when my dad snapped and yelled at me, saying I wasn't allowed to leave without talking. Luckily, Grandma was right there. She wasn't having any of it. She told my dad to lower his voice and reminded him that after how they treated me, he had no right to raise his voice in her house. Then she told him to apologize. And if I didn't want to talk to them, that was my choice. They weren't going to stay and guilt-trip me just because they were scared of what other people might think. Let's be real, they didn't come to make peace. They came because they were worried about their reputation. But I didn't care. I had my future to focus on. When they tried to talk to me again, I cut them off. I told them I wasn't ready, and I wasn't going to forgive and forget just because they suddenly decided to show up. Eventually, they had no choice but to leave. Grandma wasn't going to let them hang around and try to manipulate me anymore. After they were gone, she asked me if I ever wanted to see them again. And I told her, for now, no. So the next time they show up, she's not letting them in. I told Nathan about the visit later. He hadn't known they were coming, and apparently, when they got home, they looked pretty defeated. No one had come out of their rooms in hours. I felt kind of bad for him, but at the same time, it is what it is. Update 3. Hey everyone, so, I'm officially leaving for college in a week. I got into my top choice school, and I'm super excited about what's ahead. It's going to be a big adjustment, and yeah, I'm a little nervous. But my grandma's going to come with me, help me settle into my apartment, and stay for the first couple of weeks to make sure I'm okay. I haven't spoken to my parents in a couple of months now. And honestly, my mental health has improved a lot. I'm not randomly breaking down in tears anymore. I'm sleeping better. I actually feel like myself again. So yeah, staying away from them has done me good. Nathan says things at home have mostly gone back to normal. I guess they're fine without me, which stings a little, if I'm honest, but I'm happy for him. He and I still talk regularly, and we made a plan to FaceTime once a week, just to stay close. Our relationship is worth holding on to, no matter what else falls apart. I'll miss parts of my life here, but I'm really looking forward to the future. Thanks for checking in on me.